Hello and welcome to the Six Star Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Aveline Clark, and you're about to listen to another incredible episode with an amazing human all about how they are making a difference in the world using their passion, their purpose, and the alignment of their genius. Because I believe that we make the greatest impact in our life when we combine our passion with our purpose and our genius. That's where the magic happens. This conversation is going to be good because they always are. There's so much to gain from these. They're beautiful, they're inspiring, and I invite you to open up to see the possibilities of what you can do in your life too. Enjoy. I have great delight in introducing you to my next guest, Stevie Dawn Carter. She is a people person. She's a seasoned entrepreneur, a nationally acclaimed speaker who boasts a remarkable track record as a 5-time business owner and a best-selling author. She's got 2 decades of experience as a trailblazer in guiding individuals and organizations through practical strategies in emotional intelligence, communication, and leadership. She has a master's degree in sociology, a doctorate in leadership, and she merges that academic expertise with real-world experience in corporates, government, and non-profit sectors. She has a unique approach that blends that research-backed insights with hands-on tactics so that the diverse audiences can absorb and understand and translate that. She's currently at the helm of Empathics. She's the CEO driving the company's mission to foster emotionally intelligent organizations through cutting-edge corporate training. I am so excited. Here is Stevie Dawn Carter. Oh, thank you so much for joining me, Stevie. It's lovely to have you here. How are you?
I am good. I'm good. It's so great to be here. And I needed a good conversation to end my day today. So I'm excited to be here.
Oh, wonderful. And I needed a great conversation to start my day. So thank you for being here. I'm very excited. Okay, I love to delve into a little bit of my guests' lives, and we want to get to know you. So I'm going to ask you just a few very basic, simple questions. And the first one is, where are you in the world?
Oh, great question. I am in Mansfield, Texas, in the United States, just a little bit south of Fort Worth, Dallas, if some people know where that is.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. So yes, you're at the end of your day and I'm at the start of mine. And so tell me, who do you serve and how do you serve them?
So the majority of my work is in the corporate space doing emotional intelligence training for leaders and employees of all levels at large organizations. So I would say who I serve is mostly nonprofit charities, property management companies, CPA firms, but really anybody who has front-facing, client-facing daily communication. And how I serve them is by delivering content and training around emotional intelligence, communication, leadership, the skills we need to get the job done, in addition to all the skills you have to do the job, which I think are 2 different things. I think doing the job and getting the job done are 2 different things. And that's really where I come in and where I do my work.
I'm looking forward to delving more into that soon. What do you like doing when you're not busy serving people and doing this fabulous work?
Yeah. So I think I have a teacher soul. I'm always a teacher, always a leader, always doing things like that. So in my spare time, whatever that means these days, I run a community theater with my family, and we put on musical productions and plays at our local historic theater in downtown Mansfield, and we have a really great time with it.
That is so cool. Wow. What a beautiful creative outlet, but also a way to connect with your community and create some fun and life and joy in people's lives.
Absolutely. And I think, that is something we've done recently. When I first started my business, it was all business all the time, right? Which I think anybody who starts a business, that's where they're at in the beginning, the 18-hour days and 7 days a week, all the things. But really, it was after 2020 when I realized that just my life could not revolve around work. And I needed an outlet, and I needed creativity, and I needed light and love and joy. And I really, while my day job is connecting to humans, I needed to connect to humans in a more, I would say, creative way, or even just a more human to human way, where I don't have to be the sage on the stage piece. And community theater just kind of seemed like the perfect option. And now I can't imagine life without it. So it really has been a game changer for me as a human, just in giving me that creative outlet, which I think we all need.
Absolutely, we do. Do you do the acting yourself?
I do. Yes. I do some acting. Mostly I direct, but I do try and put myself on stage in 1 or 2 shows a year, because, hey, it's my theater company and I can. I tell people all the time, I'm always on a stage. It's just a matter of what the stage looks like, but I'm always on a stage somewhere in my life. And that truly is where I feel I do my best work. So it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Wonderful. It's so, I just love hearing how you've brought that into your life. There's obviously a journey you've been on that's brought you to where you are today. And hearing the words, I'm always on a stage and that's where I do my best work. How did you figure that out? Like, there's obviously been a pathway, a journey. I'd love for you to share with us that journey and how you got here.
Yeah. So I think being on a stage is something I actually have done my entire life. It has been the journey, not the destination. In that way, I started dancing when I was 2 years old, and I was a professional dancer by the time I was 14. I had a dance career until I was 25. I traveled the world. I loved it. And then I got injured, and everything kind of came to a halt. And it was a really dark time. I was in a really bad place. But what I kept trying to find is what's that next chapter? What's that next thing? And in the dancing career I had always loved teaching. So I went back to school so that I could teach college classes. And I got my master's degree, and then I got my doctorate, and I was working in the college classroom, which college classroom, or even K through 12 classroom, it really is still being on a stage. It's just maybe not a raised platform in life, but it is on a stage with people looking at you. And that's just always been where I feel most comfortable. So I think that was a natural progression for me. While it was a hard one to come to, it was definitely a natural progression. And then from there, I was working in higher education institutions. I loved the college life. I loved the college kids. But I got a little sick of the bureaucracy and all of the decisions by committee, and just kind of needed a break. So my husband at the time was super supportive and said, hey, I can pay for the bills for a little bit if you want to go try something, whatever that looks like. And I just decided maybe there was a way to take those things I was doing in the college classroom and make them available in a corporate environment and go that direction. And so that's how we started our business. And in the beginning, it was corporate training programs, leadership development programs, which was what I was teaching at the college before I left. And then it kind of morphed into, I really love being on stage. That's really my favorite thing. Can I keynote? Can I get bigger stages, bigger conferences? And that's what I've really been doing for the last 6 years. So I think the journey for me is always seeking that next stage, whether it be in front of a classroom, whether it's in front of a group of 500 orthodontists, which is coming up in a couple weeks, whether it's in front of my community members as the love interest in a play. It's always for me looking for that stage, because I feel in my safety, in my comfort zone on stage, I actually feel a lot more uncomfortable in one-on-one settings or small group settings. I do my best work with large audiences. So, yeah.
Wow. It's so interesting. Are you doing the small group settings now as well with your clients?
Yeah, we do, but I do steer away from, I would say I steer away from small group coaching and individual coaching unless
Yeah.
I think it's the perfect fit.
Yeah.
I really look for larger based programs, so 25 to 30 people and those kinds of things. And I think that's just, it really is a comfort thing. And
Mm.
I think in some ways that's why I lean so heavily into emotional intelligence, because emotional intelligence is really a skill required when you are dealing one-on-one or in small group. And since that's not an area I always feel great at, I've really had to learn emotional intelligence. And so I think that has really led me to teach it, because
Yeah.
I had to learn it to get through my own life.
Mm.
And so now I can show other people how it can really help them. So I don't know that I avoid the small group as much as I used to,
Yeah.
but definitely feel happier with larger audiences.
Mm.
So,
Interesting. I mean, we've heard people in the past talk about, typically those that teach something, it's something they've had to learn themselves, and it's you learn best when you teach. So
mm-hmm.
I'm hearing you say that. Tell me about the larger audiences then.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated to know how you approach that kind of an engagement or that work. How do you engage people? Say what the 25 people at a time?
Mhm.
How do you go with that? Like, how do you connect with them?
Yeah. I think for me, I always lean into storytelling. I feel as humans, we naturally connect over stories, shared experiences, shared memories. And so every time I prepare a presentation, I always prepare it by starting with, what's the story I'm going to tell today? And I try and think, sometimes it's fables, sometimes it's old stories. I've used Cinderella as a story. I've used a story about a hunting dog, the stories that aren't necessarily my story, but a story that can connect all of us together. And I think that's one of the things that we can sometimes get wrong when we're trying to connect to large groups of people, is we think that just sharing our personal story is the story that connects us. And I've always felt that it's not so much the personal story, but the elements of that person's story that connect to us all that really make a connection. And so for me, sometimes I don't tell my personal story. I tell a different story that I think is more connecting, because sometimes my story can seem not as easy to connect with. And I had a friend of mine kind of point this out to me, in that her personal story is one of a lot of trauma and a lot of obstacles and a lot of heartache. And while that's very inspiring that she has moved to this point, she always felt in larger audiences, it came across as people would tune out because it wasn't their story and they couldn't connect to it. And so she started finding other stories as a way to first open the conversation. And then she puts her own story elements into it. And I've always done that. And I think that is a strategy for larger audiences. That smaller audiences, I think you can connect more individually, because there's not that boundary between the stage and the people. If we're all sitting around a table enjoying coffee together, it's a lot more personal, and therefore telling our personal story connects us more. But I've always felt like on a stage in front of 1,500, what story can I share that makes them connect to themselves rather than connecting to me? I always think that the audience should connect to themselves first and then connect to me after that. And so that's something that I do a little bit differently.
You're right. It's really different, and I haven't heard it expressed that way. I
Yeah.
understand, like your friend saying about her story, and sometimes someone who's had such a traumatic or unusual past finds it
Mm-hmm.
hard. Others find it hard to relate to them, and
Mm-hmm.
so I like what you were saying about coming up with a story that connects us all. Like there might be an element of that story that we've been through that they can understand.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really important. How do you know that when you're delivering a presentation or a speech that you've connected with your audience?
Oh, that's a great question. For me, I am a person who looks for the smile, the laugh, the note taking. Those are my three things. If I see somebody in the audience give me a smile, that means something I said hit them. If they laugh out loud, that means I've definitely hit them. Or usually what I say when I'm up there is if somebody laughs out loud while I'm saying something, I say, and the person that just laughed, they knew I was talking about them. That was them. Because it's usually a nervous laughter of, "Ooh, she called me out." So laughter is a good one. And then I also look for note taking because I do presentations that are skill based, right? Let's learn emotional intelligence. So typically people are going to take notes. And that moment they first write something down is the first moment you know you made that connection and that they got something from that. In the virtual space, I do a lot of engagement questions. So I'm always asking people to pop into the chat and let me know what they think or what they're feeling. Or I ask them questions like, give me a 1 in the chat if this applies to you, give me a 2 in the chat. And that's a way to kind of connect virtually. It's definitely not as easy to read the room virtually as it is to do it in person. But those are things that I really look for. And I think also just in our preparation, and I think this is true whether you're talking to an audience of 500 or just talking to your neighbor next door. I don't think we always plan what we want to say and what we want people to hear as much as we probably should, right? And that's one of the lessons I've learned in emotional intelligence is people with high emotional intelligence plan their conversations. They don't just fly by the seat of their pants. And I think for me, what that means is really thinking about who the audience is and asking those questions, right? Of meeting planners and people who book me to come in, tell me who they are. Tell me what kind of work environment. Tell me what they're dealing with. Tell me what their obstacles are. Because then I can choose the stories, the jokes, the anecdotes that fit them, which may or may not be the same as the group I speak to 3 days later. And so I also think that being willing to customize your message for the people in front of you is also really important.
Wow, that's so interesting, Stevie. I have a question. Given that you've been working with these larger groups in, I guess, medium to corporate sort of enterprises, what do you see as being the biggest need for them at the moment? I mean, I feel like you're on the periphery. You get to look into these organizations and tap into the people there and the heart and soul. What do they need the most?
Well, I think they need a lot of things and everybody needs a lot of things. But I think if I had to come up with like top 2, maybe let's go with top 2 things. First and foremost, I think one of the things that gets in everybody's way is assumptions. I think we make far too many assumptions. And in the workplace, what we see is how those assumptions are really getting in the way of true communication, getting in the way of decision making, getting in the way of relationship building. And I see that day in and day out. I will speak at an event. I'll have somebody come up to me afterwards and they'll say, hey, loved your presentation, but like, how would you deal with XYZ? Like this person does this to me, or this person says that. And one of my first questions that I always ask somebody is, have you talked to them about it? And the answer is usually 9 times out of 10, well, I mean, no, but they know what they're doing. Okay, that's a really big assumption that they know that they're doing this to make you mad or those kinds of things. In my experience, people actually don't care that much about making you angry. They're just living their life, doing their thing, and they just happen to do it in a different way from you. But since you've made that assumption, you've now cut them off and just decided everything they do is against you. And I don't know that that's true and accurate. So I think the first thing that all of us need, but especially when I'm out doing my work, is I try and remind people we got to let those assumptions go and we got to ask questions. Hey, do you really hate me or am I just feeling that? Like, because I will tell you again, 9 times out of 10, you ask somebody that and they're like, no, I just don't care. Well, that's fine. Indifference, very different from hatred. But I think in our minds, we build it up as, oh, this person's out to get me. This person hates me. No, you're not their favorite, but that's okay. They're not your favorite either. So we keep going. We keep doing the work. So I think letting go of assumptions is a really big one. The second thing that I'm dealing with a lot these days, especially in leaders, is this idea of empathy. Empathy is such an important skill, and it's something that we all need to utilize. But what I found is a lot of people are utilizing it in an inappropriate way at work. They're using it in a very appropriate way if we were all close friends and family. But the truth is that work, there's a line, right, between a leader and the people that they lead or the people that they support. And when you use too much empathy, or what we call emotional empathy or actionable empathy, when you use that level of empathy, what you're doing is you're putting yourself as an equal to that person. Oh, you've been through a terrible divorce. Oh, I've been through one too. I know how that is, right? And all of a sudden, we're equally experiencing these emotions together, which causes two problems. Number one, now you've placed yourself as an equal, which doesn't always work when you then tomorrow need to give them some critical feedback on something as a supervisor. But number two, it's emotionally draining. And if as a leader, you're doing that for 25 people, I don't know how you have any empathy for your friends and family back home, because you've already spent it all, right? Empathy is a battery. We only have so much to start the day with. And if we don't recharge that battery, then we're going to be spent. So I've been working a lot with people on learning the difference between cognitive empathy, which is understanding that somebody has a problem and supporting them in that, versus emotional empathy, which says, I'm going to feel it with you. I'm going to experience it with you. People really want to be seen and heard. They don't need you to be their equal. So I think that's something that we're seeing a lot of, because people have been told for so many years, be empathetic, be empathetic, be empathetic, which is great, but at what cost, right? How do you be empathetic but still protect your own peace? And so that's something that I'm working on a lot these days. And I don't know. It's my own personal soapbox. We're going to get empathy right kind of thing right now.
Keep going on that soapbox, Stevie. I it took me a long time to realize that I had a very deep sense of empathy in the world, and probably to my own detriment. I was into my late 20s before a friend said, I think you're an empath. There's these labels around, and maybe I do fit that model, and I had to learn to choose when to engage the empathetic muscle and when not to. And that took effort for me. And the way you just described the cognitive empathy versus the heartfelt emotional empathy, I've not heard that expressed in that way before. And you know what? I absolutely get it. And I feel like this is something so important, because the battery that you talk about, I mean, we all have an emotional battery. And my guess is we all have a different size battery.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you bring that up. So in some of my sessions, what I have people do is we actually draw batteries on pieces of paper, right? And I explain it like this. Like, if you were to look at your phone battery, right? It has those little rectangles inside the battery symbol, right? Each rectangle is for a portion of your life in your day, right? So I have this rectangle for my spouse. I have this rectangle for my children. I have this rectangle for work. I have this rectangle for my church community, right? Like all these little rectangles. But the truth is, every emotional empathetic conversation takes away one block. So if you think about that, if my total battery for the day is 6 blocks, right? And some people have 8 and some people have 2, right? But everybody's is different. But just as a way to get them to visually see it, if my battery is 6 blocks, which is average for most of us, we have about 6 groups in our life. If my battery is 6 blocks and I have 5 conversations at work, how much battery do I have left for family? Right? You run out. And somebody said something to me once, and I rephrased it to make it make sense to me, but it has always stuck with me. She was such an intelligent, wise human. And she said, why is it work gets our best and family gets the rest? And I think that really hit me because I look at it as family gets whatever's left over, right? So if you are an empathetic human, if you are quote unquote, and yes, I agree with you, the labels, right? An empath. But if you feel that emotion strongly, you're going to burn out by the time you get to friends and family. And I'm a big believer on they deserve our best. Work is how we make enough money to spend time with them. So they should get the best part of us, and work should get the part of us that gets the work done, right? Like, get the work done. That's all needs to be done. And so I think if we think about empathy as one of those things that's draining that battery, then we need to think about how much of that battery drain is happening at work. Because if it's all happening at work, then what do you really have left over at the end? And then that, of course, leads us to how do we recharge it, right? And you don't recharge it by doing more of it. Like it's not self-renewing, right? So we have to actively do things to recharge our battery. We have to be in silence. We have to be away from people. We have to be able to turn off our devices. We have to be able to meditate, take deep breaths, do yoga, go outside. There's all these different ways we can recharge it, but you've got to put the effort in to recharge it or you're not going to have anything left. And I just think that's like a sad state of affairs, right? If I don't have any, and I know I've done it and I do it more than I should because I know better. There's so many nights I get home from work and my husband's like, what do you want to do tonight? And I'm like, nothing. I'm done. I don't have any to give, right? And is that really fair? You know, I mean, he understands it, of course, and he loves me through it, which I adore. But at a certain point, that's not the right choice, you know? So, yeah. Anyway, like I said, I'll go on this soapbox forever.
It's a great soapbox because I don't believe it's not a conversation that we have. Certainly not in business circles, the community that I run, the 6-star leaders. You know, we talk about different topics. And I think this one that you're talking about is so important for everybody, right? Whether you're a business owner of one, a business of one, or a business of 100, a business of 1,000. And this, I've always known about the battery, and I know that there are also things that drain us and things that fuel us in terms of activities. And a few years ago, a friend of mine did this mapping for me, and she does this with her clients. And she went through a process to identify the things that fuel me and then the things that drain me. And she did it, you know, from all of her experience. So she asked certain questions, and then I was able to identify them. And then what I did is I used Canva and I created a 1-pager, and I used a symbol for each of the things that fueled me. So I had my packet of these are the things that fuel me, and here's how long I need to do that activity for, whether it's singing a song, dancing, or whatever. So I have on the wall this little guide of you know, what things I can do and the length of time to actually before I feel like I'm re-energized. And obviously some things take a lot longer than others. And I mention that because it's something that stuck with me, and I realized how valuable it is, yet I still haven't connected that to what you're talking about. As in, I need that because in the work that I do, I connect with people on a deep level. So with my clients, I'll go into a session, it's one-on-one. And yeah, I come out of that, I feel like I've been tuned into their energy for the full 2 hours, and it's uplifting, but it's still draining.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And I think we think draining means negative. Like it has to be negative to be draining. And it doesn't. Being happy is also draining. It's an emotion, right? So
Yeah.
one of the things I learned when I was studying emotional intelligence is this idea of recovery time. So for every minute you experience an emotion, happy, sad, doesn't matter the type of emotion, but you experience it, you feel it within your body. For every minute you experience it, it takes you an equal minute to recover. So if you think about that, right? Like if we take an example like you, at somebody who's connecting on a deep level with somebody in a one-on-one space, and maybe you're doing that for an hour, right? Realistically, you will not feel like your normal self without their emotions until an hour after that. But do we all take an hour break in between each thing? No, of course we don't, right? So that's where the drain happens, right? Because instead of giving us our recovery time within those spaces, we wait. We go back to back to back to back. And then we get a little bit of recovery time. But by this point, we've experienced so much, we can't recover in the 30 minutes for lunch that you have. That's not accurate, right? So that's again where family time can sometimes be a thing, because if you spent 8 hours, all of this emotion, when you get home, you're just in recovery. You don't, so you're already drained, you're already done. And I think you bring up such a great point. We talk about the drain, and it can sound like the things that drain you are always negative, but that's actually not the case. It's any time you experience an emotion is a drain. And that can also be happiness. That can be celebratory, right? A lot of us have had that. I'm sure you have. I had one just yesterday. I did a webinar, 350 people. It was awesome. They were engaged. I was super excited, right? It was great. And I needed a nap immediately after. Like I was like, don't talk to me. I am done. Like I needed that break, but it was happiness. It wasn't bad. It wasn't negative. I just needed to recover because of all that energetic emotion I had. It had drained that battery. So I think you're so right in finding those elements that recharge you, but also remembering that it doesn't have to only be the negative things that drain you. It can also be positive. And one of the things I recommend to the people that I work with is we have to find ways to put more breaks in our day and stop being back to back so that we can get some of that recovery time happening. It may not be one-to-one as much as it should be, but at least get some recovery during the day, because if you're back to back till the end of the day, you're not going to recover until the next day, which means anything that evening is really a waste.
And that leads me to think about, first of all, what does the average person do when they get home? They're done. How do they then spend their evening? Right, that's the first thing. And then how does their performance or outcomes? How's their productivity the next day if they're still drained? How impactful are they on the people they serve? Or and where's their creativity? How does it impact all those things?
Right, because it's not it if we're not making up for it every single day, right? Then we have a debt. Right? So you're accruing, right? We talk about on the biology side, they talk about a sleep debt, right? Like if you lose enough sleep over enough days, you now owe a sleep debt, right? Emotions and energy are the exact same way, right? It's the exact same way, because emotions are hormones. That's all emotions are. Emotions are hormones. Hormones make you, quote unquote, feel whatever you feel. Those hormones are in your bloodstream, and your body has to pump that blood and filter it out once the emotion has ended, right? Which is why we have the recovery time. So if the average person comes home at the end of the day and just sits in front of the TV, maybe spends a little bit of quality time with the family, which would be great, right? Maybe you have something that is nice and positive and maybe even fuels you a little bit. But if the rest of your time you're just sitting, like one of the biggest things we can do to pick up the pace on our recovery time is work out. Get your blood pumping faster, and those hormones get out of your system faster, right? So one of the number one things you can do is not sit on the couch. But of course, if you're tired, what do you want to do? You want to sit on the couch, right? And then what we can see is if you have too many of those days in a row, and for the average human, it's 3, which is not very many days. Let's just be honest. Some of us are thinking, I've had years, Stevie Dawn. You have. But the average human, after 3 days, your productivity now starts to lapse. So if you go 3 days without a full recharge, 3 days of just kind of draining, and maybe you feel yourself a little bit, but you never really fully recharge and you just keep doing it, by the time you get to day 4, you're going to start seeing a decrease in your productivity and your focus. And you're going to find yourself more and more tired, which means everything's going to take longer. So now that's a steady decline until you get a full recharge. And a full recharge, again, has to be the same number of minutes as you experienced it. So if you're in a 3-day debt, you would need a 3-day recharge, which most of us don't have. How many days do we have in our weekend? 2 to make up for the 5. Do you see how we're always in debt? Right?
Yeah.
And I don't do math in public, but I can see that that's a problem, right? And also, I think, one of the things that's really interesting to me is look at this as we're talking about individual things, right? But what about globally, right? The pandemic, 2020, that was a year of emotion, 18 months of emotion. So in 2024, are we back to baseline yet? That's a question, right? And so as we see people still dragging and people still mentioning it, and in some ways, I think, especially those of us that are like positive psychology people, we're like, come on, let's see the hope. Let's see the good, right? Like, let's not worry about it. But I can tell you, as somebody who studies it, somebody who lives it, I'm still recovering. It is 2024. I am 4 years in. I am still recovering physically, mentally, and emotionally from that drain. It was a big debt that I have to pay off, right?
Yeah.
And so I think we also have to think about those kinds of things. It's not just the individual things, it's also the big things.
Yes. And it, like you say, it's everything's emotion. So the drain is emotion. So if we have emotion around a family matter, let's say we've got a family member dying or who's really sick, and you're constantly like needing to help or support, even emotionally, if not physically, and that goes on for months. That's the drain.
That's the drain. And you can't recover. And I think from like a business perspective or a relationship perspective in a professional environment, this is where that idea of being aware that everybody has life going on, right? And that life is probably taking a toll on their productivity and their relationships at work. And we need to give them time. And I think the thing is, we always think the time should be a lot shorter than it actually is. Right? I think we instinctively are like, oh, a family member passed. Let's give them a week to go to the funeral and they should be back to work and be fine. No, that's not how it works. Number one, that's not how grief works on its own. But number two, if, like you said, if they had to care for that family member for the last 3 months, 6 months, that's going to be 3 or 6 months down the road before they're okay. And I think we hold ourselves to the standard, like we should be able to sleep on it, wake up and be fine. That's not how our bodies work. But that's not how it works. And so for me, a lot of the reason that I talk about it and teach on it is absolutely what you said earlier, which is because I have to learn it for myself, because I hold myself to a super high standard of being able to just shake it off, move on. And I can't. And I have to accept that as well and be soft and gracious with myself to say, yes, I'm not going to be okay tomorrow. And that is okay. It is okay to be not okay.
Thank you for saying that. I think in the last 6-12 months, maybe it's because of the COVID thing and how I've learnt much as on my own to recover or move through it. I've become better at saying no. And if I'm not okay, I'll go and cancel meetings because I need to.
Amen.
If I can't bring my best self to a meeting, I'm not going to do it. I'm not serving myself and I'm not serving them. And I'm totally fine with that now. In the past, I would have been mortified, nervous, freaking out. What are they going to think? All that rubbish. But today, no, it's.
Well, And I
Yeah.
think if we could teach the corporate world anything, it would be to allow that, right? Allow people to have control over their schedule, to say, I am not in a good place today. I don't need to be at this meeting, right? Like if I can't bring my whole self to it in a good space, I am just going to drain the rest of the people. That is not where I need to be. But I think we live in an environment, as you said, where that's penalized or that's seen as shameful or embarrassing or bad. And so people don't do it. And so they show up at these meetings not in a good space, not able to actually give 100%. And then they wonder why the meetings go poorly, And if you had just rescheduled to tomorrow, it could have been fine.
That's right. Could you imagine a world where we honored the human, and like you said, it was okay in corporates to say, I'm not able to, go to that meeting, or actually let's reschedule that till tomorrow or next week or whatever. Could you imagine if we honored the human and let them have the space to be their best self? What kind of world would we live in?
Well, I think it would be one where we're all a lot happier in general. And I think there'd be a lot less stress and a lot less disagreement. And I think that's always the thing when I get these calls from companies, they're like, Stevie Dawn, we have bad employees. We have unhappy employees. We have employees who don't know how to talk to each other, right? Come in and fix them. And that's always the thing. And I hate that because there's an element of me that's like, fix the system, not the human. The human is fine as they are. We need to fix the system they work in. And to me, that's one of the number one reasons why people are not great to each other or snappy with each other or something in a bad way at work. It's usually because of this emotional stuff that we're not allowing them to handle. And if we just allowed them to handle it, they might be okay to each other. They might be nice to each other, right? But if they don't have any space, how can they have any empathy? And I just, yeah, I mean, that world would be beautiful. And I keep hoping for the day. But what I do say, and I say this to everyone, so I will say it to you. It starts with us, right? So we accept that, we live that message, and then anybody we work with, we encourage that of them, right? So I always encourage people in my training programs, if we are in one-on-one settings or small group settings, I always say, if you can't come, don't come. If you're not 100%, you don't need a doctor's note. You can just tell me, Stevie Dawn, I'm not there today. Okay, great. We'll get back to it when you are there. Let me know, because I would rather have you when you can be ready for the information than to have you on a day where you're really not okay.
Yeah. Brilliant. You're obviously you're so engaged with your work. You're very passionate, and I so love this. I love, speaking with you. It was one of the things when I first met you. I was, just so excited to have met you. You're purposeful. You're passionate. Mm-hmm. You're obviously living on purpose in a way. You've got a bigger purpose for what you're doing. Can you describe what that is? If you, yeah, please.
So I do a purpose exercise every single year to remind myself of my purpose, to make sure my purpose is still the purpose I thought it was, because I think purpose can change over time. So I would tell you that my purpose right now, and it has been for the last 3 years or so, has been, my goal in life is to make sure other people don't feel invisible. And what I mean by that is I want every human that I interact with to feel seen and heard. And if they feel seen and heard, they will feel accepted and welcomed. And when we feel accepted and welcomed, innately in our bodies, that means loved. So for me, if I can make humans feel seen and heard, accepted and welcomed, they will feel loved, and they will know that they are not invisible. And so that is my purpose, and that's why I do the work I do.
I love that. What was the moment was there a moment where one day you kind of went, this is it. I'm living the work. I'm doing the work that I was born to do.
I think it was when I had somebody come up to me in a session. And of course, people come up to me after sessions and say, good job. Like, we're great. We loved it, whatever. But I had a person come up to me and say, you not only helped me at work, but I think you just saved my marriage. And that to me was so much deeper than I work in the corporate environment and I'm happy there. I do not want to become a marriage counselor. That's not on my list of jobs that I would want, right? So like there's an element of I don't go in to do that. That's not my thing. But to have somebody say that and just truly mean it, she had tears in her eyes and she just truly meant it in that moment. I thought, then I did good work today. And I don't know that I always think every day, like I can walk away and go, I did good work today. Some days I'm like, I don't know that was really great. But when people give you that feedback, when people give you those moments where it's not just about teaching them a skill, but you touch them in some way, because in that moment she felt seen and heard. And that to me is so much more powerful. So I always look for those moments as reminders to myself that I am doing the good work and that I am being successful at that good work. Um, and I look for those. I also always hold on to anytime somebody says things like, you know, thank you for hearing me, or I feel so welcome. Those keywords of seen, heard, accepted, welcome, love. Those are my keywords. And I live by those. So anytime somebody says one of those, it's like a little trophy inside my head that I get to receive to say, oh, I did it today. I did that good one today.
I'm sure that the listeners have said that to themselves listening to this. Yeah. So I'm speaking on their behalf. Yeah. I feel all those things. This is the 6-Star Leaders podcast, Stevie, and I always like to ask my guests what being 6-star means to them. So what does being 6-star mean to you?
Well, I think for me, it means I think it goes back to purpose. I think it goes back to not just being good at the work or good at your job or even good at being a human, because we've all met some people who are bad at being human, good at being human. But it means having that thing that drives you that you can look at every day and go, as long as I got up and did this for one person, I was successful today. And I think when you can find that in yourself, and then you find a way to share it with the world. And that can sometimes be the struggle, is finding a way to share that. But when you find that, I think then you've reached that 6-star level, right? Because you're now taking all the skills that you have and all the goodness that you have when you're a star and saying, how do I take it to that next step? And to me, it's that purpose, that why, and being able to share it with others. That's 6-star.
Love that. Love that so much. Thank you. What's on the horizon for Stevie Dawn Carter? What's a big, hairy, audacious goal you may have, or something in the future that you're envisaging?
Yeah, so we're going through. I would say it's a year of. So I do a word of the year every year, and my word this year is rediscovery. And so actually, instead of growth this year, I'm trying to think in terms of rediscovering things I've kind of let slide or I've kind of forgotten about myself this year. And so some of my goals aren't really big in terms of like a new big stage I want to hit or a new big number goal and revenue that I want to hit, but more rediscovering some of the small pieces of life, some of the fun pieces of life that I've really let go of. So like one of my things is reconnecting with friends and making time for friends because I'm super busy and I travel a lot. I did 36 trips last year. So I'm not home very often. And when I am home, I'm doing theater. So I'm not really available. And so this year, one of my goals is just make time for my friends again, right? Have dinners out and happy hours because I haven't done that in years. And so I don't know that there's a big goal on the horizon, but more a rediscovery of self this year. And that will be growth over the course of the year. That will be growth.
Absolutely. So important to do that. Really, really important. Here we are at the end of our conversation, Stevie. I've so enjoyed chatting with you, learning more about your work and how you're making an impact in the world. It's inspiring and I've gotten a lot from this conversation on a personal level as well. So I just want to thank you for everything that you've shared and given today.
Thank you.
How can the listeners get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So the website is empathics.net. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's usually where I am the most prevalent. I'm there every day. I try and post content, but mostly I just stalk other people and comment on their stuff because that's more fun. But anytime you want to reach out to me through our website or through LinkedIn, I would be happy to chat with you about any of these things, all of these things, all the time, because I love it.
Thank you. Now that we're at the very end, I just would love to know if you could leave our listeners with just a little nugget or a tidbit, something to leave them with as we say goodbye.
Yeah. I think I will leave everyone with this. At the end of the day, it is so important to protect your peace. Because when you're at peace and when you're in a good space, that is when you can truly serve others. So protect your peace.
Wow. That's profoundly powerful and beautiful. Thank you. Stevie Dawn Carter, you're amazing. I'm really grateful for you. Thanks for being here. What a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as I did in hosting it. So please rate, review, and leave us a comment below. And finally, also, I'd love you to share it with a friend, someone who you think would get something positive from it, someone who would enjoy it. You know, we're here for each other, so please share the love. If you'd like to reach out and talk to me and learn about how you can make a bigger difference in the world by serving the ideal clients that you have with purpose, please get in contact over at journeypoint.com.au. See you on the next episode of 6 Star Leaders Podcast.